Let me first of all say something about Buddhism. So what you have is the founder, and then you have the followers. You have Jesus, and then you have the followers, what we call Christianity. It's a world of difference. So let me kind of just break it down. What you have is a single man about 3,000 years ago. For a good 19 years, he walks around town. He sees people like me, unshaven, beard gray, hair fallen, wrinkles, and laughs at me. Says, ha, the guy's getting old. Doesn't internalize the experience that, yes, one day too I will get old. Doesn't do that. He just laughs at me. And then he sees me coughing up blood. So, old and sick. Laughs at me again. And then one day, as he's having food, his mom says, remember our neighbor Amir? He died, he had a stroke. Oh, well, he was useless anyways. That's the first part of his life. There's a good amount of things around him. He sees, but doesn't study what he sees, doesn't examine what he sees, doesn't reflect about what he sees. That's the common place for all of us human beings. That's where we occupy the most space. A lot of things are happening, but we fail to study. Then magic happens to him, and it's a bad magic. And the magic is this. I walk past by this young kid, and he sees me being old. And he says, what will happen to your face? Now, why would you ask that? Because you're curious. You've taken time to stand, to pause, to look, to study, and to become curious. And then I say, well, damn, you're 19, you'll get there, don't worry. And then he says, what the hell does that mean, I'll get there? Is he saying that I too will get old? Now, all of us in this class know we're going to get old, and all of us in this class know we're going to die. Just not today, and not tomorrow. For some strange reason, this kid some 3,000 years ago was in the right place, and I don't know how that comes about. He may be one of those freaks of nature, like a Kobe Bryant, or a Tiger Woods, or a Muhammad Ali, or a Magnus Carlsen, or a Bjorn Borg, because these are all sports. You have physical sports, you have emotional sports, you have intellectual sports, and you have spiritual sports. And all these different types of sports have their own unique geniuses. I mean, you're not going to go home and think about your age. In a few minutes, you're going to turn to be 60, and your back is going to hurt, and you're going to start forgetting things. You won't think that way. You know why? Because you have hopes, because you have plans for your future. And those plans for your future distract you from the fact that you will get old. And in old age, what do you really need? Then I run by him again, and now not only am I old, I'm also sick. And when he asks me, what the hell is wrong with you? I say, well, I'm sick. That's what happens when you get old. The point I'm trying to make is he has the capacity and the ability to internalize things. I don't know if you fully understand what it means to internalize something. I have been 27, and I have sat where you're sitting, and I desire to get my bachelor's and my master's, and I wanted to have a car, I wanted to have a house, I want to get married and have kids. I have been already to places you want to go. I can internalize how difficult it is for you to sit there and listen to me. But you can't internalize my position because you're not yet 60. To internalize means you remove those shoes and you put your feet in my shoes. And you walk where I walk, not literally, metaphorically. What does it mean to be old? Now, when it comes to internalize the awful realities of getting old and getting sick and dying, what is worth pursuing in life? What is really meaningful? For the Buddha, certainly not the life he was living. Now, when you begin to ask these questions, what happens to you? Well, you want answers. I mean, that's what our frontal lobe does. You want to go out there and figure out this puzzle. Dad, if I'm going to die, get old, get sick, become weak and feeble and forgotten, is there anything I can do to protect myself against these realities? And for the first time you realize you love your father, but he's incompetent. So you read the Gospel of John. It's a waste of your time. You take classes, that's a waste of your time. When you ask serious questions, you realize no one is able to answer you in a way that is sufficient for you. Then you feel alone, isolated. Then you walk into the forest because life can't offer you much. And in the forest, what happens? Okay, so you pray, so you meditate, you do this, you do that. You may even have an out-of-body experience. You may even see Jesus Christ sitting next to you and giving you a pep talk. But he says, I don't want experiences. I really want to understand. And that's the thing. Most of us in this class, myself included, we are junkies. We are after like tiny bits of emotional inspiration. I want to read a book to be inspired. That's not what the Buddha wants. He doesn't want to be inspired. He wants to understand. And that's a difficult thing. I mean, imagine you never had a relationship with your father because he was never really part of your life. Maybe he was far too selfish. Maybe he was a drunk. Who the hell cares? For all these years, you've reacted. I hate my father. But for the first time now, something about you happens, an opening. You want to understand why your father was such a jerk. You really want to understand. And so, like a good detective, you ask your mom. And your mom says, you know, your father, his father was a drunk. He beat him up every single day. When your father left the house when he was 6. She said, really? Yeah. Your father had no protectors. He worked at Home Depot and then in and out. And then he was in prison. And then somehow, after sobering up, he went to AA. He made his life work a little bit, but still was profoundly angry. So I never knew any of that. Well, now you do. And the moment you begin to understand, you realize the more you understand, the less you begin to hate your father. And the more you begin to feel bad for all the things that a kid needs to have, but he didn't have. And that's what the Buddha wants. Not once in a while picking up the phone saying, Dad, it's okay, I forgive you. And then hating him for another 6 months. Now, eventually the Buddha comes to understand a few things about life, right? Now, when you understand something really, really well, something happens to you. You become like a magnet. But as a human being, when you become a magnet, paper clips don't attract you. What slowly move towards you are human beings. The Buddha begins to gravitate or pull people towards him. His charisma, his magnetism, there is something about the way he is. And when you look at his philosophy, it's very, very, very dark and gloomy. But nobody cares because there is something about understanding that creates honesty. And inasmuch as you may hate to hear honesty, there is something about us that is profoundly attracted to it. Even though something says you can't like it, hate it, fight against it, but you also embrace it. When the Buddha goes to the forest, he leaves a culture behind. He leaves a wife behind. He leaves a son behind. He leaves his family behind. When you speak about Zen Buddhism, you're talking about people who have no husbands or wives, who have no culture. The only culture they have is they are born at the age of 2, they begin to read sutras. You have no idea how difficult it is to walk away from a parent, to walk away from a culture, to walk away from power because he was meant to be a prince. Is it still commendable for people to walk into the desert, close their eyes, make sure their body doesn't move for 5 hours and have a vision? It's great, it's beautiful. But they lack something that the Buddha didn't lack. They know what it means to be human. They know what it means to be in human relationships. And they know how difficult it is to walk away. The Dalai Lama is great. He says wonderful things. But he was put in a basket, taken out of Tibet at the age of 6 months old. He was never married. He didn't have a son or a daughter. Or maybe he did, he just doesn't know, who the hell knows. But what I'm trying to say is that the founder has no choice but to struggle through all the attachment to the culture, the narratives, his own desires and passions. Whereas the monks in the Zen Buddhist tradition don't have to, because they don't have those things. Some people just enjoy experiences without understanding them. I mean, look, I don't know if you smoke weed or not. For those who smoke weed, and I'm not talking about having a stage 4 cancer, I'm not talking about having migraines, just talking about it's just part of the culture. You've had friends who smoked, they invited you, you took a couple of puffs, you liked it, and it became a routine of your life. What usually happens is when you smoke, it gives you experience. Now, why don't you go and hang out with some Native Americans, authentic Native Americans, or Mexicans, say certain parts of Arizona. And what you'll discover is this. Before they actually allow you to smoke, there are certain stages you need to go through, certain rituals you need to perform. You're not here to have a good time, man. You're here to understand certain things that are profoundly serious. And then when it's time for you to smoke, they'll give you the peyote. But you will smoke at the same time knowing where it came from, what the culture demands. You don't do it for fun. You don't even do it for pleasure. You do it for transformative insights. So could going to the monastery, closing your eyes and having an experience become a foundation of a transformation? Could be, yeah. But it usually takes a long time, about 20 years.